All right. So this is Saturday afternoon, the 16th of March, and this will be our last Skype call. And that next weekend we will be doing it on Discord to Dhamma Friends. So be sure, everybody, to move over to the Dhamma Friends. I know that Dean and Santiago is there, and Ivan. So everybody who, if you hear this recording, recognize that we're not going to be doing it on Skype anymore. But I want to also start off by thanking Skype. I'm not so sure I'm as grateful to Microsoft as I am to Skype, but Microsoft is the owner of Skype, and they've decided to murder it. And so they've got the blood of Skype on their hands. I guess that's better than Friedrich Nietzsche, who has the blood of God on his hands. He killed him in about 1880. The Christians haven't found out that Nietzsche killed God, you know. They said, in fact, they argued it. So anyway, we're moving to Discord, and I thought that at the final Skype call, we could talk about generosity in general, and that I've got several stories to tell about generosity, and somebody's already asked me about stories. And so we'll start off our talk on generosity by talking about the fact that it can be taught in story form, that in fact the Buddha used stories a lot. We normally think of them as similes, as metaphors, as analogies, but we can also call them stories. And that the story uh, generally, uh, especially if we call the story a fable, it's generally got a point to it. An example of that would be Sisyphus rolling the stone up the hill. And then he loses it and it rolls back down, and he's doomed to roll this stone up the hill. And he could just take a nap in the shade of that big stone. But no, he still rolls it up the hill. Or we can have the fox jumping for the grapes, and the grapes are out of reach, and so the fox says on the way away from the grapes, they were probably um, sour anyway, which means then that when we don't get what we want, we become disappointed in it. And so the storytelling is quite common. I would say offhand that almost every sutta that the Buddha taught probably had a story, a fable, an analogy, a metaphor, simile, something like that, to say, look at A and apply that to the Dhamma B. So basically, this is what storytelling is all about. Rather than dry descriptions, we tell it in story form. Now, there's a really, really good reason for that. Offhand, is that the story that we tell is not personal. For instance, I talked about Sisyphus, and then I talked about uh, the fox, and that we can say, oh, the fox was chasing the grapes, and he walked away saying sour grapes, and that the one who was telling that story could, in fact, not tell a story and just say to the person, hey, you're chasing something you don't have, and look how sour you've become, a big sourpuss. All right. But people don't like that so much. They don't want to be told directly. They want to hear it in story form. It's much more entertaining that way. And so, in story forms of gratitude, I would like to tell you a story about a movie. And the movie is the name of the movie is The King and I, and it came from a play called Anna and the King that was done at about 1910. I see, Chris, you're smiling, so you may know about this movie. It was, in fact, done in 1956. And the name of the story, or the name of the movie, is The King and I, and that it's about Anna, who was a teacher who came from England to Bangkok as a teacher for all of the royal kids. And that the king at that time was quite progressive. In fact, his name was King Mongu Paramasi, which means Prama 4. And that when I was in Thailand many, many years ago, I found out that the Thais population really, really loved that movie, except they did not like Yul Brynner playing the king, because Yul Brynner played the king of Thailand very much like he would play a Western cowboy, a tough guy. And that Praramasi, King Mongu, was actually known and is well loved by the Thai people as having been noble. He was a noble king. Now, in fact, there are literally thousands of drawings and paintings of him throughout Thailand. And the one that surprised me most was in the United States. I saw a beautiful portrait of Praramasi in a Cambodian monastery. So he's well loved, and that there's very good reason for it. He was born in 1804, and that he was a monk for 27 years before he became the king. He actually disrobed, but he was a monk for 27 years, and quite an important monk because he was in the royal family. And so he was the one that started, by the way, the Dhamma in Thailand, because they had begun to see that the village temples, especially, not so much the forest monasteries, but the city temples, had kind of become like Christian churches, kind of falling apart. Monks with their hands in the collection plate and all of that kind of stuff. And so King Mongu reformed by setting up the Dhamma, and that it was so successful over the years that he actually, by starting the Dhamma, actually reformed quite a bit the larger body called the Mahanakai, which actually translates directly as larger body. So the story is that he had a son who came Vicharan, Vicharam rather, and Vicharam was born in 1860. He was just about the last child that King Mongu had. Now imagine just the timing. He was born in 1804. He grew up to about 1824, became a monk for 27 years, and that puts him right into the 1950s. And by 1960, he had 47 children. Wow, he was busy for a while, but he was in his 50s. So one of his sons was Chula Longhorn, and Chula Longhorn became the king, and the son Vicharam became a monk and continued with his brother in the work of the Dhamma tradition. Now he also became the Sangha for Thailand. So let me tell you what a Sangha is. It also has the word Samdet. But you can see, if you know any Pali, Sangha Raj means king of the Sangha, and that they have kind of a hierarchy, and they've kept that hierarchy. Normally, whoever is the Sangha Raj of Thailand stays at Wat Pawan. Now, in Thailand, they actually have 6 different groups, or let's just say provinces or jungwats for the monks. There's 6 of them in Thailand, and that the southern group when I was ordained was Kesa Thero, and he was my preceptor. Now, the thing that's very interesting is that the Praram C, his son, then became regent in I think about 1915, 1916, and so he also disrobed to become the regent because Chula Longhorn's son wasn't old enough to actually become the king. And when he disrobed, he passed that title on to, through a Sangha, a large group of monks, to a monk by the name of Bhikkhu Buddhadasa. Now, we're actually now three parts of that lineage. And Buddhadasa, the reason I'm telling this story is because Buddhadasa met Bhikkhu Buddhadasa in the 1930s when Bhikkhu Buddhadasa was actually in trouble in Bangkok, and that the leader of that Sangha Dasasa for the trial of Bhikkhu Buddhadasa was Buddhadasa. And Buddhadasa was so impressed with Bhikkhu Buddhadasa that he became Buddhadasa's teacher. And so what we can say then, that all of us who have great love and are part of our lineage goes, if you want to put me in there, from me back to Bhikkhu Buddhadasa, back to Buddhadasa, back to Vicharan, all the way back then to King Mongoose. So we can trace the lineage back to 1804. I think that's pretty interesting. And not only that, but there are many, many Thai scholars and a lot of lay people who know about this lineage. That's why I was saying that when the Thai people saw the movie and saw how Yul Brynner misplayed the king, because King Mongoot was nothing like the tyrant that Yul Brynner played in the movie. But other than that, the background, the scenery, the costumes, and the manners of the people were quite accurate according to the Thai people. So this history is just a story, but it has value to it. Why? Because now we can kind of put a little bit of me in that story, which is exactly the point of the story. So we talk about a story as being something out there, but it's going to be of value when we bring it in here and make it something personal. Now, in the I think it's in this one of my favorite suttas, number 22, the Assembly of the Snake, where the Buddha is chastising one of the monks for misclaiming that sensual desires and sensuality is not an obstruction. And the Buddha then told him, haven't I told you in so many stories, in so many ways? And then there's actually a list of the number of stories, probably not all of them. And in fact, there are so many stories listed in that sutta that I don't even know the sources of all of those. But some of them have it, like the simile of the saw, the simile of the snake, the simile of the raft. There's the number of stories that the Buddha taught went on and on and on because it had value. So, what we're going to be talking today about is that we can feel gratitude. I feel gratitude actually, even for Yul Brynner, because Yul Brynner, in misapplying that movie, gave us a kind of anchor or way of remembering that the real king of Thailand at that time, King Mongoot, was actually a noble and considered so for all of these years. I mean, he's been dead since like 1860 or something like that. No, a little bit longer. 1868, I think, is when King Chulalongkorn took over. So there's also this story that's very dear to the Thai people that point out that members of the actual royal family have been noble within the noble Dhamma, and that this nobility actually has come all the way down through the last king that just died, King Bhumibol. Now, his son, unfortunately, was much more into motorcycles and uh, queens of or movie stars, and in fact, fast jets. He loved the jets that the Americans brought, and because of that, he didn't stay a month long enough to actually get that quality of nobility. Guess what? The Thai people don't like him so much. I'm not going to go off into any stories like that because there's laws against it in Thailand to talk down about a king. But most of the kings that they've had for the past 200 years have been worthy of telling stories about. So, all of these stories that the Buddha tells, we can take great gratitude that these stories have been quite useful and valuable. Now, here's something that we can use as a story or an analogy is how many of you have ever seen a Model T Ford? Or maybe it was the Model A, I forgot which, okay? Now, they are nothing like the modern automobiles of today. But the modern automobiles of today could not have happened without the Model Ts and the Model A's that were more than 100 years ago. And so anyone who is a car buff should, in fact, feel that gratitude that I'm really glad that they had Model Ts and Model A's, and we'd still be riding horses today with our whole yard and the whole streets all full of horse manure. But we got it started. And so I want to use that story as an introduction to the concept that I would call Western Buddhism. Now, in Asia, when the Moguls, along with the Brahmins, started making real problems for the Buddhists, in fact, from about 1200 to about 1400 AD, they killed off somewhere between 80 and 100 million Buddhists. But I don't think that that was actually correct. They did destroy the library at Nalanda. They did tear up the Bodhi tree. They did do a whole lot of damage. But it would be very, very easy for those Indians to take those orange robes off and put them in a closet, or to take a hike, which is exactly what happened. That there was a mass exodus out of India, and that Thailand was the beneficiary of that. So the Thai people then have that value. But the interesting thing is that Buddhism was already in Thailand, here in southern Thailand. In fact, it was a great Mahayana kind of center. That Chaya was a big city, and at about 700 AD, part of the Srijaya Empire that was first Hindu and then became Buddhist. And the Chaya is the city where Wat Suan was located. And so there is a World Heritage Museum there about all the kinds of stuff that they have been able to dig up around Chaya. And that even at Wat Suan they have statues that are prominently displayed that were dug up. They're Mahayana statues, and they date about 1,300 years ago. So these the stories that I'm telling you indicate that there's quite a history, but the important point that I'm making is that Buddhism came to Asia through monks, through noble monks, groups of monks who were fleeing from India and settling all over Asia And that's why you have Sri Lanka and Burma and Thailand and Laos and Cambodia and even Vietnam have the Buddhism that came, and that they came with many nobles. Now, that's a contrast from what we have found in American or Western Buddhism. In the West, the Buddhism was not brought by monks. It was brought by laymen. In England, they had scholars. The scholars, I.B. Honer and Riles Davies, did original translations of the Sutra. And that then we had a few people, like in the early 1970s, we had a few Americans who came to Thailand. It was pretty heavy for them. They didn't stay very long, but they brought enough Buddhism back to get started. They were actually psychologists. The two famous ones would be Joseph Goldstein and Jack Thornpeak. So they're, by the way, still alive. One of them was in Barre, Massachusetts, and the other one was in Spirit Rock outside of San Francisco. They started teaching Dhamma, and now there are literally millions of Western Buddhists. And that I would like to point out, without doing too much fanfare, is to say that we could be very grateful for these guys to bring Buddhism to the West, but they brought it in the form of a Model A or a Model T. And that now it's time to bring it kind of not up to date, but back to date, back to the actual teachings of the Buddha. That there are, in fact, many, many now actual Buddhist wats and temples that have made it, partly due to the fact that people wanted to support the monkhood because the lay people had already broken ground for that. They were the pioneers, even though the teachings that they still teach is not noble. It's just ordinary Buddhism with all the ordinary things of it. In fact, the words that they use is like insight meditation, vipassana, and what's the other word? Mindfulness. You probably heard these words in reference to Western meditation. But the interesting thing is that the word vipassana or insight meditation hardly ever appears anywhere in the suttas. In the Dhammapada, it's not mentioned. In the Majjhima Nikaya, it's not mentioned. There of the 56 books of the Samyutta Nikaya, not one of them is named Vipassana. That the only place that, in fact, that I've seen Vipassana in the older literature was when Bhikkhu Bodhi used the word as a subject heading, but he put it in brackets to show that that bracketed term Vipassana really wasn't in the Pali at all. So why are they teaching Vipassana meditation? That wasn't what the Buddha taught. But there is a huge group of people. And the other part about that is that part of the reason why it's not noble is because there are so many people in the West who really don't understand the teaching of the Buddha from the perspective of the monks, but they do from the perspective of the lay people, which means also the perspective of ordinary people, news, entertainment, and that. And so many Westerners fancy themselves as teachers, but they don't even know basics about what the Buddha taught. Many of them will claim arahat. Oh, I'm an arahat. And he's never even been a monk. He doesn't even know what's going on with the teachings of the Buddha. That, in fact, there was a very famous monk in Burma called Mahasi Sayadaw that started, but he died in 1982. And his group then was taken over by U Pandita, and U Pandita was the one who spread the Dhamma in the sense of talking about noting. They call it the Mahasi method, Well, guess what? The Mahasi method that got out of Burma and got into the United States has very little or nothing to do with the actual teachings of the Buddha. But we can still be grateful that it's here, because the students who have been taught that kind of stuff are now capable of picking up the Noble Dhamma a little bit easier. That a road that has been used for centuries for horse transportation is a whole lot easier to pave than a road that the road graders and the big machines are just out there building a road from scratch. And so I think that the Noble Dhamma will be easier to spread in the West, simply because we have this foundation that is not actually the teachings of the Buddha, but it gives people a foundation so that we can build the actual teachings of the Buddha. So now that I've droned on about that for a while, I guess I should also point out what is the teaching of the Buddha, because we have actually been talking about what's not the Buddha's teaching. But what the Buddha's teaching actually is, in fact, he says it directly. In, I think, 4 or 5 different suttas, he says it directly this way: is both formerly and now I teach only one thing, and that is dukkha, dukkha nirodha. There are also suttas where the Buddha says that I have not declared what happens in the next life. I have not declared whether the world is infinite or whether it's what the beginnings were or anything like that. All the kinds of stuff that Christians and atheists complain about and with each other and debate, argue over. The Buddha did not declare any of those things. What did he declare was the Four Noble Truths. And so any teacher who is going to be teaching the teachings of the Buddha has to have his entire teachings founded in the Four Noble Truths. This is the teaching of the Buddha. Now, the funny part about that is that actually the Four Noble Truths, the Buddha actually borrowed or maybe even stole that format or that concept or that story, in the sense that it came from Ayurvedic medicine. And the Ayurvedic stated in the sense of there is illness, there is a cause of illness, there is a distinction between what is the illness and what is not the illness. And then they have not just a diagnosis, but now they've got a cure for it. And so those are the foundations for the Eightfold Noble Path, is that's the cure. The first noble truth is that dissatisfaction exists. People are dissatisfied. I imagine anybody who's listening to this talk has been dissatisfied with it at least one point or another. And so the cause of that dissatisfaction is because of ignorance. Why doesn't that old fat dude get to the point? The answer is that, well, we're just on a journey. We're telling a story here, guys. And so the cause of it is that we don't know and we want to know. This is meaning of the term ignorance. The real cause of the dissatisfaction or dukkha, by the way, in the suttas, is badly translated into suffering. I don't think anybody here is suffering, but everybody here goes in and out of dissatisfaction. So the real teachings of the Buddha is not about there is suffering. The real teachings of the Buddha is that we momentarily become dissatisfied, and then we're satisfied again when we get what we want, and then we're dissatisfied again. And so a part of that cause of suffering is that we want things that we don't have. We might get it in a minute, and then when we do, we'll be satisfied. But when we don't get it, we're dissatisfied because we want it. Now, that wanting can be in 2 directions. We can want to get rid of, pushing it away, or we want to bring it coming this direction. So greed and ill will are actually the same thing, and both of them bring on dukkha or dissatisfaction when it's done ignorantly. Now, deeper than that, there is a deeper teaching of the second noble truth, and that is the teaching of Paticca. And the basic reason that the Buddha was teaching Paticca, which means dependent origination, which means that things that ever occurred because of dependencies, that nothing really comes up spontaneous, that when something does come up spontaneous, it's because of conditions anyway. So he also taught the five aggregates because the five aggregates are part of the Paticca. He also used another system called the Four Foundations of Mindfulness, which actually in the time of the Buddha were the four elements. Things were hard, things would flow, things would heat up, and things got smoky, which we have for that would be the body, the feelings, the mind states, and the mental objects. Well, those four things actually fit quite well into the five aggregates of the body, the feeling, consciousness, perception, and memory, which is actually just part of the mind, those three things. So we teach the five aggregates in order to establish with the student that you are not one of those five aggregates. Who are you? That's not a decent question. But the decent answer to that question is you're a moving target. You can't be defined. The body is moving, your feelings are moving, your thoughts are moving, your perceptions are moving, your consciousness goes in and out of your ears and your nose and your mouth. So everything is in flux. And if you can understand that, then you can also understand that whoever the hell you are, it's in flux and it's going to change pretty quick. And so that gives us something that we can begin to watch on, is to start noticing how things keep changing. And the one thing that changes the most is, guess what? The mind. The Buddha said, in fact, in one of the sutras, the mind is so fast, O monks, I don't even have an analogy for it. And so that means that we need to start looking for what's in the mind. In other words, let's stop being so ignorant about what we want and what we don't like. Let's start looking at things, which brings then to the point of, if you can do that, if you can eliminate this second noble truth, guess what? You're okay. The third noble truth is that you're satisfied. Why? Because you got rid of the dissatisfaction. Now, most of what you would consider ordinary Buddhism, not the super mundane, but ordinary Buddhism, is magical. They're looking for very high things. They say, oh, the elimination of dukkha is way out there someplace. Someday my end of dukkha will come. Rather than recognizing, no, you can bring an end to it right now. But you have to do it again because the dukkha will come back, because new ignorance will come back. And so you got to do it again. There is also a teaching about this Eightfold Noble Path. There's actually 3 Eightfold Paths. Let me talk about them for just a second. The one is the first kind of Eightfold Path is for ordinary people, and it has 3 pieces to it: Sila, Samadhi, Panya. Sila, Samadhi, Panya means morality comes first, and then the development of the mind so that you can see things clearly. And seeing things clearly then is the wisdom. But once you gain that wisdom, now the path changes from an ordinary path to the Eightfold Noble Path that actually starts with wisdom. And then it goes through more development to where the mind actually does become completely integrated. And from that, then the end of the story, at least on the outside, would be the sila, the morality, in the sense that if you've got your mind together, you're not going to go around hurting people to get something that you want because you don't want anything. Isn't that marvelous? So the ordinary is you've got to get your act together. We're going to give you precepts. We're going to give you hell to think about and become afraid of. We're going to give you all kinds of stuff to get you to act correctly. This is the kind of thing that we give our children because the children are not ready to become wise. It takes some practice to become wise. So once we become wise, then we practice the Eightfold Noble Path. Now, the third kind of Eightfold Noble Path is actually called the Seven Factors of Enlightenment. And what is the difference between the Seven Factors of Enlightenment and the Eightfold Noble Path is one word that we can remember, and that is unremitting. So when we begin the Eightfold Noble Path, we start with sati, but when we have it fully developed, then it's an enlightenment factor. It's a factor of bodhi, a factor of awakening. Why? Because it keeps coming back and keeps coming back and keeps coming back. Why? Because we developed the habit. We've actually developed the skill of keep coming back to reality over and over and over again, to remember to look and to look over and over and over again, to begin to look at what's real. Begin to stop, in a way, stop telling the stories and start looking at what's real. So we start with the stories, and then we wind up with not needing the stories anymore and start looking at things in reality. But guess what? If we're not paying attention directly to reality, we're going to go fall back into telling ourselves stories again. That storytelling machine that we have inside the mind, by the way, the Buddha calls it, there's two words for it, but the word that we could use in English would be perception. And perception is the art or the quality of taking input and turning it into a story so that we can understand it, because we like stories a whole lot better. So the Buddha wasn't against storytelling at all, but what he wanted instead for you to do is begin to see, number one, that you tell yourself stories a lot. And then number two, to stop telling your stories and start living in reality. Over and over and over and over again, unremittingly, keep coming back. And in that regard, then the Eightfold Noble Path step of right noble effort now becomes energetic, because it's unremitting. It keeps coming back. In the beginning, it takes effort to push things off, to get things going. But once they're on a roll, you don't have to work so hard anymore. In fact, it's very easy to keep things moving if you develop that habit. And also part of that is now we're going to add the features of what is in the Pali Piti Sukha, which means joy, which means satisfaction, that you're really on top of your game and you like it. Another factor of the seven factors of enlightenment is relaxation, relaxation of the body. That's why, in fact, we practice in the beginning to become aware of the body, to start looking at our breathing, to start noticing what the body is doing, so that eventually the body will relax. So what I've done today is talk about it in the entire teaching of the Buddha in a nutshell. That's the whole teaching right there, is to look at what you're doing. Remember to look at what you're doing. Remember to look and to change. And pretty soon the change is really easy, basically because there's not much to change anymore. And the whole point of it is to come out of dukkha, come out of your dissatisfaction into a state of satisfaction. Come out of your storytelling into reality. And that's all there is to it. The real teaching of the Buddha is not magical, but ordinary Buddhism, that which has made it to the West so far, is quite magical, with high teachers sitting on big chairs and gurus and practices and things that people need. But when you switch from the ordinary into the noble, what that means is that you switch from needing things on the outside into not needing a darn thing, because you're already good. You got everything you need. And so this is the major change that needs to be made for Western Buddhism. So don't go around like I have for so long, pissing and moaning about how bad Western Buddhism is. We needed it. It's our foundation. It's the horse trails that we're going to build our superhighways upon. It's the Model T. Now we're ready for Ferrari. So let's not be judgmental. Let's, in fact, be quite grateful that we've got these fake, false arahats out there. All we really need is some real ones. But we have to put up with the fake arahats, but we can't say that they're bad. We could just say that that's not the teaching of the Buddha. So there have been a number of really famous Western teachers in the West, and people still flock to them and often have to pay huge amounts of money to be around them, to where now, going to the point about the Vietnamese War that America was in. In fact, in Vietnam, they call it the American War. But most of the Vietnamese War was fought by the Americans out of Thailand. With all of that bombing, there was no possible way for all of that bombing to happen from aircraft carriers. Oh no, all of those bombing runs happened from right here in Thailand. And what did all of those airplane mechanics and flyboys and all of that, what did they do when they landed their plane? They went to town and picked up a girl. And then they took the girls back to the States. And then the girls started building temples and ordering really good monks. Now, the Thai people, they know the difference between a really good monk and some fake arahat. And so they went around and found really, really good monks. In fact, they almost all of them want to have a monk that's been at least 20 years as a monk. And so what I would recommend to Westerners is to stop going to the Model A's and start going to the Watts, where they're going to find a Ferrari or two. Use them as your students. Move in on those guys. I'm pretty sure that you can't move into the retreat centers because they don't have enough room. But the Watts, we've always got an extra place for you to lay down. Maybe even a storage locker to keep your gear that you probably don't even need and won't even take out of the storage locker. I remember one time, I thought it was so funny. Achan Post says, you know that bicycle that you rode to get in here? We've still got it in the closet. Do you want it? I said, what? That's been years ago. And I went and took a look at that bicycle, and nobody wanted it. It took a lot of work. It had been pretty well destroyed. But I think that he was teasing me when he said, do I want that bicycle? So the point here that we're making is that Westerners need to stop reading books written by other Westerners and start going to find some really excellent monks. There are over 500 temples, Watts, in the United States alone, and another 300 or 400 now in Asia, in Europe. In fact, they're popping up all over the world now. And so if you want to really get the real teachings of the Buddha, you're not going to get it from laymen who have never ordained. And about the best they can do is to go find another layman and pay him a lot of money. So he'll say, Shaktipat, here's your certificate. Now you're a Dhamma teacher, $7,000, please. But if you go to the Wat, they're not going to charge you any money at all. In fact, what they're going to do is they're going to make sure that you understand the noble Dhamma and then help you to set up meditation classes in the Watts. There's a number of Watts in the United States that I know of that have noble monks. Why? Because I've been there. I've done that. I would recommend that if you have a Watt that's been run by let's say through the lineage through Achan Cha, you're going to find good places there. Achan Samedo, Achan Amaro, Achan Pasanto. But any Watt will do Any what is better than a meditation retreat center. Don't go to meditation retreat centers. That's the Model A. Go get a modern, high-speed monk who's going to teach you the right Dhamma. So, does anybody have any questions about today? About generosity? Let's be generous about the foundations. I'm really have great gratitude for all of the people that I've met along the way, including you guys. Thank you very much for coming on to the talk. And now we're going to end this thing. We're going to take it over to to our own Ferrari. We're leaving our Model A of Skype behind, and we're going to graduate to a better piece of software. So, Ivan, do you have any questions about what we've been talking about?
Yeah, it's just the Western Buddhism thing really resonates. People are too arrogant.
Yeah, you see a lot of it on the Discord, don't you?
Yeah, there's too many. There's too many to count. Quite a sight to see. Yeah.
All right, Dhammarato, where have you been? We've been waiting on you.
Yes, I was a little bit late, but I think I got all the good parts. I hear all the good parts, so I feel very satisfied now.
All right. So I want to make sure that, let's say, Paul has moved to Discord, Santiago, Ivan, Thomas, I'm not sure about you. Dean, I know, has gone. Make sure that you're on Discord because we're leaving Skype. Karwan, go ahead. See your hand up.
Hi, Dhammarato. Thank you. I'm enjoying it a lot, man. I'm here every week since I have I have known you. I have been here literally, I think, every single week, and I'm noticing.
I've got no place to go.
I have nothing else to do also this time. So yeah. But you know what I'm thinking about is what I miss in this whole teachings that you do. What I think what would be helpful for me, especially, and maybe I think also for others, if we have some specific practices or some specific trainings or like step-by-step things we could do.
Actually, that's a very interesting point, because those kind of techniques and practices that you're asking for is part of ordinary Buddhism.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that in the noble Dhamma, you've got right now to practice. You've got right now to look at what you're doing and to change it, to remember to look at, to remember to. You've got your own fire. You're good. You live in a paradise. This is nice reality that we have. Why do we spend all of this time telling ourselves stories when we could enjoy reality? So we don't need a technique. That comes from the quality of, oh, I'm not good enough, I need a technique. Oh, I need an insight meditation. Oh, I need a guru. You don't need that. Can you remember you don't need that? Can you remember that you're already okay? Let's celebrate.
Yeah, but I totally understand. But even that, to make that into a practice.
That's the practice, by the way. That's what I just said. That's the practice. That's the noble practice, is to look at what you're doing, to remember to look at what you're doing and make a change from the unwholesome to the wholesome, which is another way of saying, look at the stories that we tell and stop telling stories and start remembering that we can be in reality.
I notice many times, I'm just thinking about other people or about myself or about some circumstances which are just, negative or hateful or...
They are going to be that way, and it's not your job to fix them. Your job is to be happy while they're negative. You can't fix the world. I mean, the world right now is in great turmoil because you've got so many people trying to fix it. If everybody would stop trying to fix the world and sit down and enjoy the world, guess what? We wouldn't have all of this conflict. We wouldn't have political parties. We wouldn't even need a king or a Trump or a Putin or anybody. The reason why we've got those people is because they're so unhappy, and you can't fix them. But you can fix yourself.
So basically, just be happy. Yeah.
Just be happy. Don't worry, be happy. Yeah, there's a bunch of unhappy people out there. They're going to come to you, knock on your door, and say, here's a whole shitload of unhappiness. We want to give it to you because we don't want you to be happy. We want you to be just like us. And all you have to say is, no, thank you. Then, in fact, the Buddha tells a story about that. And the story is about that a man was actually quite angry at the Buddha. He came and he fussed and he fumed and he fought, and the Buddha just sat there. And when the guy finally shut up, the Buddha asked him a question. He told him a story. He says, if you, a rich man, went and set out a dinner party, invited everybody. I mean, it's Ramadan now, so you got people over and you invite them to Ramadan. What if nobody comes to your party? Who owns the food? You put out a party and nobody came. Who does the food belong to now? And the rich man says, oh, well, I guess it still belongs to me. I can go give it away or do with it what I want to do because nobody came to eat it. And then the Buddha says to him, that's exactly what we've got right here. You came to give me a party. You came with an angry party and tried to feed it to me, and I'm not eating it. So who's got it now? Who has the anger? So remember that one, okay? That if you don't partake of their anger, then it belongs to them. You don't have to become angry because they are angry. In fact, you can be grateful to them to remind you that you don't have to be angry when they are. Isn't that a blast?
It's very nice. What I found most difficult when someone misunderstands me, and then I want to correct myself. Let's say someone's angry at me, but I know yesterday something happened and he's angry at me, but I know he does not understand me. That's why he's angry at me. And I feel like, okay, now I need to defend myself for something that I haven't even done, or it was not my intention.
Actually, no. If a way you can think of it is, all you need is another story. All you need is just another story to tell them. That's what the Buddha would do when people didn't know. Like the last one that I told you was that the Buddha told him the story. Well, what if you had a bunch of food that you tried to bring house guests and they didn't eat it? Okay. So you can actually tell that story to those people and say, I'm not going to eat what you're selling. So it's still, you can keep it. They may not like to hear that, but it'll they'll take it away and mull on it. They'll think about it, and it'll become a value. Don't try to fix them. Just tell them stories and let them figure it out for yourself. Just like I have not been able at any time when we've been talking. You've been on all of these calls, Carwan, and not once have I been able to fix you. Not ever have I been able to fix you, but look how much fixing you've done for yourself. Look at Santiago. I can't fix him.
I don't need no fixing. I'm happy.
Yeah. So, Thomas, what do you think?
Yeah, thanks for the teaching, and I really like that focus on generosity and gratefulness for teachers, even if they may not be teaching the absolute noble Dharma. Just coming back to the idea of stories, and you talked about obviously the sort of the eightfold path for ordinary people versus wise folk. If we then apply that to sort of stories and storytelling, could we look at essentially two sources of joy? One is joyful stories for ordinary people is one way. So the story itself can be a source of joy. It's the ordinary path, as opposed to there's something beneath that, which is just allowing things to be as they are and satisfaction with things as they are, which is kind of underneath the story itself. And so depending on who you're speaking to, you decide what sort of message they're ready for. Can they find joy just in the story for now? And but then somebody else who's a bit more, or you meet people in the context more of the Dharma, then you can talk, you can
actually
encourage them to go beyond the story
directly to them. That's the ones who are really open. And so we can teach that there's really nothing to it. There's really no story. We don't need any stories. All we need to do is just relax and say, wow, oh, what a relief it is. I'm at the end of the story. So, right. The first part of it is then that the storytelling is for the ordinary people. And the end of the story is when they become noble. They don't need any stories. They're already happy. Don't worry, be happy. That's the end of the story. Amrit, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question about the way you define perception, because usually I would say like I have a perception of a tree, or I have a perception of your voice. Is it a story or?
Well, actually, the eyes themselves only see shapes, forms, and colors. Hearing only hears sound waves. And that, in fact, you've got a mechanism, a storage unit. Maybe even you could call it a plug-in or a software routine that is called English language. And so you put the words of my mouth and the sounds that you hear from your ears, and you plug it and put it through your English language processing machine. But you also put a lot of other stuff in there because of the words that are used. You've got a different definition of the word than I do. And so I'll say a word, and by the time you hear that word, you've made something out of it that's different than what I meant. That's why we try to tell a story, so that people can get the point of the story. And that cuts through kind of the definitions of the words, so that we can actually begin to teach then the Dhamma in very simple terms, very simple words. The more complicated the language, the more difficult it is to get through to people. That's why college professors are paid so much money, is because almost nobody understands anything they say. So keep it simple.
About the story and the perception. Yeah, I get your point. So we have a software and we are translating the sound waves and the visual waves into some story. But when Buddha said, don't tell yourself stories, so what does it mean? So then I would have no perception. So I would hear your sound, but I would not translate into English, or what?
Well, let's remember that not everybody is going to be at the level of, in fact, you could think that an arahat doesn't even have to listen to the stories. Doesn't have to listen to them, because he already knows everything he needs to know. That, in fact, I saw that with Achan Po quite often, that a whole group of people, maybe a family that having a family squabble or something, they'd come to him and they'd jawbone on and on and on and on and on. And at the end of it, and they wanted his results, he would grunt, and they were happy with that. They kind of got it off their chest. And so that's what an arahat really is best for, is just to be there to to pretend to listen. Doesn't really have to take it in. I have seen, in fact, other times when people would come to complain to him about something that was happening at Wat Suan Mok. And he was the abbot, so ultimately they'd come to him. And they say, oh, this is broken and that's broken. And what his response is that, okay. And pretty soon, maybe it got fixed. Why? Because they didn't finish with him. They went and told some other monk, and maybe they got around to finding a monk that would actually listen and do what they wanted done. And so that was the amazing thing about Wat Suan Mok. It kind of ran itself. The Bhikkhu Buddhadasa and Achan Po were so wise that they didn't have to do anything. The Wat ran by itself. Jose, you got your hand up.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
So you've been talking about the histories that we made up or that we tell yourself. What could be good histories to tell ourselves?
Everything is okay. Everything is fine. Wow, what a nice moment this is. I can relax. I don't have to think about the bank. I don't have to think about going to work right now. I don't have to do anything. I can just stop telling myself stories and just enjoy the moment. Don't have to tell myself stories about going to the bank. I don't have to tell stories about, oh, I've got to go get on the call. I don't have to tell myself those kind of stories. I can just get on the call, have a ball.
Why do you think that we tell ourselves the story that is not enough?
Well, you were trained that way. You probably picked that up from the adults around you when you were still a young child. Your mom went around being dissatisfied and telling lies, and so you picked up the lies she tells, and now you're beginning to tell them again. Now, I can understand that some ordinary people would get really angry. You're calling my mom a liar? Well, no, I'm saying that humanity, ordinary people, they teach their children to lie. And so we repeat those lies. That's the perception, is we always start adding our own misunderstandings and lies and wants and ignorance into the mix. That's why we don't really understand much of anything, and we want more data, more information. And what we really need is a clean signal, not more noise. So, anybody else? Chris, you got something to say?
Dhammarato, can I say something?
Please.
Dhammarato, so actually our life, or my life, is just a collection of the stories that I tell myself all day long.
Yeah, that's who you are.
Yeah.
Who you are is whatever story you're telling yourself right now. Which means when you're not telling yourself any stories, you're not much of anything, are you?
Yeah. As I was thinking, especially about fear. Many times I used to experience a lot of fear, but sometimes I was also getting too tired of it. I would just say, fuck it, and basically just giving up the story in that moment.
That's just another story. I'm so tired, fuck it. That's just another story. And if you can see that, I'm telling myself, fuck it, I'm too tired. Well, if that's what happened, then you can make the change of, wow, I'm glad I saw that. Now I don't have to fuck it anymore. I can just sit here happily. Or another word of saying it in modern English, fuck it.
That's actually very easy, yeah. There's
nothing to it. Okay, Chris, back to you. Muted mic.
How about now?
Yes.
Okay. So I just want to say that your pep talk gave me chill bumps. In 19 more years in robes, I'll be ready to move back west and pave some Dhamma roads.
I'll give you a Ferrari to go there in.
And the storytelling thing. So I think we decided there's two kinds of stories. There's stories you tell other people, and then that's a whole nother topic. But the stories you tell yourself, that's what we talked about too. Not what we started out talking about, but what we ended up on. It reminded me, I used to have a pretty good t-shirt collection. I've even been known to have one custom printed with my own logo. It reminded me of some of my t-shirts. Like one of my favorites was "Don't believe everything you think." Right? Like, not sure.
Right.
And
it's just another story.
It's another story. And the way I stop telling myself stories before they get out of hand is I look at them. Who's the main character here? And another t-shirt was because I'm Chris, that's why. and those dangerous stories, I'm always the main character, right? I'm always telling myself a story about who I am, and gosh darn it, I'm good enough, and this is a life worth living. Look what I can do. Look what I can do. I'm always telling myself a story. I'm the main character, one way or another.
Well, in that Aesop fable of the fox trying to get the grapes, why don't we tell it from the perspective of I am the grapes? I'm not the fox. I'm just sitting here high in the air, and that fox is down below just jumping and jumping and jumping and getting frustrated there, Garwan. And I'm just sitting here being happy grapes. And he can't touch me. So we could even change our perception in the story. So, Paul, do you have something to say? Dhammarato, go ahead.
Dhammarato, is it fair to say that when we have a hindrance, say a hindrance of fear, for instance, which Karwan was talking about, is it fair to say that the fear is the one who is telling the story, and we are then identifying with the fear?
Yeah, why is it that we keep telling ourselves all these horror stories?
So if we don't identify with the fear, the story can still be, but it could also be fun. Like when we watch horror movies, right? It could be very interesting and very.
Yes, it is. When you stop being afraid, then any activities you do is not hard work anymore. It's just a toy we're playing with. We can begin to play with everything we do as if it were a toy to play with. So, Timo, let's hear from you.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right. I like that you had the idea to make a story about being able to be grateful for these Westerners, fake arahants, and so on. So I thought, in a way, that's also kind of a good counter story to maybe a negative story that is possibly unwholesome, to say, these guys suck, they destroy Buddhism and so on. So yeah, that was a thought that I had.
Mm-hmm. Here's the thing. Why should we tell horror stories about horrible things? Why should I speak negative about people out there talking about the Dhamma in negative ways?
Yeah, that's right. And also, thank you for not being a fake arahant. I'm very grateful for you.
I'm nothing at all. I'm not here. No need to claim anything. In fact, that's an interesting point, that who's an arahat is not the guy who calls himself an arahat. The arahat is the attitude of the people that are around him. Bhikkhu Buddhadasa was quite clear about that. And in fact, one time it happened is that somebody came to him and says, "Are you enlightened?" And his answer was, "Who or what is it that you think is enlightened?" In other words, what he was pointing at is that enlightenment is in the eye of the beholder. It's not the work of art that's beautiful. So here I am, just kind of a work of art. I think it's more like a line drawing. But who and what I am is in your perception. So I give that to you. To where people who are out there claiming, oh, I am an arahat, I'm a sotapan, oh, I've got 4 jhanas, oh, I've got 8 jhanas, oh, give me money. Those kind of people are ordinary people. Everybody brags. Everybody adds to their story. Till we stop telling stories. So, Mikey, why don't you tackle us all about it? Make sure that we've got Discord links and all of that.
The story is over. This is the happy ending. Enjoy it. Yes, if any of you have issues getting on Discord, please let us know. You can email Dhammarato. There will be a link to his email in the YouTube description. You can also contact us via the Open Sangha Foundation website. We want to make sure that we're all staying in touch and able to make this transition to Discord. So yeah, if you're having any issues there, please let me or Dhammarato or a member of our community know that. And yeah, I'll be posting another link to join the Dhamma Friends Discord again in these Skype groups. And like Dhammarato had mentioned, these Skype groups are coming to a close. So come on over and chat. And we've already got people also setting up one-on-one calls as well on Discord. So if you'd like to do a one-on-one call, which we highly encourage you do, then go ahead and get that scheduled. There's a one-on-one channel in the Dhamma Friends Discord. And like I said, if you're having any issues navigating Discord or anything like that, please let us know. Let's make it easy on each other. Thank you, friends.
Is Ivan still here? No, Ivan has left. Never mind.
No,
All
I'm
right.
here. I'm here.
Oh, okay. Ivan.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Huh,
Yeah.
I don't see you. Anyway. Oh, there you are. Okay. Did you get your OBS software going?
Something's wrong. I don't know why. I really tried the way, and there seems to be some. It just, I don't know. It says some error. I really don't know why. I had to troubleshoot it again.
All right. I would suggest 2 things. One is to talk with Mikey about it because he's quite the expert. And number 2, what I would say to do is when you're doing that, I don't know about Discord, but I do know that Skype does have a screen share. So you can share your screen with him and he can tell you what to click.
Yeah, Discord has share screen too. Yeah, I will let yeah, I'll call my team, but not now. Maybe tomorrow.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, let's finish this up by having a great big happy thank you to Skype.
Thank you, Skype.
May you rest in hell. May you enjoy your life on the dung heap of software. You've been so good. I have been, by the way, on Skype for many more than 20 years. It's that old. That's what one of the reasons is why I was so slow to get to Discord. Is because I knew Skype.
How am I going to call home now? International calls.
Oh, I have the same thing. You can go, there are actually many websites and you can use ChatGPT or some software like that that will give you links to programs that are willing to pick up even your Skype number and continue. I know of several different ones. I've had to check that out myself.
I don't want to talk to people anyway.
Well, some people might want to tell you stories. So anyway, up to you. Thank you all. Thank each one of you I am so happy that we've got such a great group of people. This is just so nice. And thank you to Skype. And thank you to King Mongoot and all of the lineage all the way back. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
What a marvelous life. Thank
See
you,
you, everyone.
Santiago.
Okay.
Thank you especially to Mikey. Thank you, Ivan. Thank you, Paul. Thank you to Amit. Thank you, Timo. Thank you, Karwan. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Jose. I very much appreciate each one of you. I really enjoy having friends. All right. We'll
Bye.
see
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Dhammarato.
Thank you.
So